Welcome back to the discussion for this week's double Torah portion. The portions are Matot and Masai. It takes us from Numbers chapter 30 through the end of the book. So next week we will be doing Deuteronomy. So this is a double portion. And right off the bat in chapter 30, we have something that, in my opinion, has been misused in certain circles.
That might be an understatement.
It might be. It's been abused.
Yeah,
in certain circles, and including, by the way, I should point out, by well-meaning people.
Yes.
This whole chapter, which is a chapter on vows, has been stretched and mistaken and misapplied to a very great extent to support, let's say, an over-patriarchal view of men and women. So
I believe that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
And that comes from, I lean towards a patriarchal society.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean that I approve of the blatant oppression that has historically happened.
Right. The two do not necessarily equate. They can equate, but they're not an equivalence.
Right. And, let's get into it here.
Yeah.
First of all, when a man makes we're in verse 2.
Yeah.
When a man makes a vow to Adonai or formally obligates himself by swearing an oath, he's not to break his word, but is to do everything he said he would do. Okay.
And this is from an era, let's point out, of dumb vows. So, I mean, I can only imagine it's like, by Thor, if I haven't, sheared that sheep by the end of the day, I shall do. I should have thought of this beforehand. But, those kinds of things, it's like swearing of oaths. And here it's saying, okay, if you swear an oath, you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then it goes through and says, if a woman makes a vow or obligates herself while she's a minor in her father's house, then her father has he can let it stand or nullify it.
Yeah.
And the same with a wife. In the same day. In the same day, yeah. And the way this is talking about vows.
Yeah. It's a pretty big deal.
And it's typically applied universally. But this is talking about vows. And I wonder, in our discussion earlier, it was brought up, we have kind of gotten away from vows in our society today. And it would seem that we've done that from the Messiah's teachings of let your yes be yes and your no be no. You don't be making unnecessary vows.
Yeah. Don't swear by the temple, don't swear by, because that's the house of God, and et cetera. It's just stop all this ridiculous swearing and about, on this and that, and simply tell the truth.
Right.
And stick to your word.
But yet, throughout the Torah, it talks about offerings that are brought for vows. Mm-hmm. So the question was raised, are we missing something?
Yeah.
Are there vows that we should be including in our lives that we're missing? That might be a totally separate discussion than what we're dealing with here, but I felt like,
Yeah, it might. And the best answer I think that came up was that if you're doing a vow to God, so you're saying, Lord, I really need it to rain. My crops need to come in. If you'll let it rain and give me a bumper crop here, I'll give you, instead of 10%, I'll give you 50%. So that would be a form of a vow.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that you're doing there that we're missing is that you are interacting with God.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking to him. You are bargaining with him. It's true. And we have kind of a negative connotation around, oh, you're just bargaining with God. It's like, well, but there have been plenty of times where God was bargained with, like King Hezekiah. They came and, the prophet came and said, well, you're toast, basically. And he pleaded with him, and God gave him 15 more years.
Well, let's take a step back. When at the, Jacob's ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob made a vow to God, and we still abide by it today because our tithe was something that Jacob vowed to God. If you will be my God, I will return to you a tenth.
Yeah.
That was put forth in a bargain situation. And I've always questioned, was that appropriate? And I'm not suggesting that it wasn't, but it has a flavor to it that is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because I don't like the idea of that we can bargain with God.
Yeah.
That troubles me.
But he does seem to, in some cases, respond to it.
Yes.
Like when Moses, when the children of Israel, was it the golden calf?
Golden calf was one.
Golden calf, and Moses, God said to Moses, stand aside. I'm going to wipe out the children of Israel. I'll start over with you.
Mm-hmm.
And Moses is like, no, please hold on. Let me take care of it. I'll go take care of it, and it'll be good. And let's not have your name be besmirched that these people were taken out of Egypt,
right?
And
you couldn't take them
for
to
you,
Promised
and
Land.
then you couldn't take them to the Promised Land. And anyway, I think the key thing, and this came from our earlier conversation that we had around the table, off camera, but I think this thing that really stuck with me is that engagement with God. It's not the bargaining per se.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you are engaging with God. You're involving him in your life where that's
Mm-hmm.
concerned. If you're trying to make a deal,
Oh.
And he wants that. He wants to be involved in your life.
So let's go back to we've kind of abandoned the whole thing of vows.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing so, have we inadvertently abandoned engaging with God?
I would say that we've abandoned a point of engagement, but not necessarily that we have abandoned engagement. One thing that's becoming more and more clear to me in my thoughts over the last several months is that, some people hear from God and some people don't. And it can be honestly, it can be burdensome to the people that don't. Some people desperately want to hear from God.
Yes.
So far, and this is very unscientific, I haven't done like a scientific poll or anything like that.
Right.
But so far, from the people who I know where they fall along those lines, and where I also know what they do in terms of talking with God, the people who talk with God are the people that hear from God.
That seems logical.
It does. I mean, it's almost one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, duh, but it's only obvious in hindsight,
Well,
So-
I don't usually bother to communicate with people that don't talk to me.
Exactly.
I mean, that's reasonable.
Yeah. But I mean, to be clear though, there are folks that do pray.
Mm-hmm.
They pray formally and all that, and they may even pray with their families, which are all, by the way, good kinds of prayer.
Yes, they have their place.
But I think that this simple talking with God, having a conversation with him as you go about your day about whatever's on your mind, whatever's burdening you, or whatever's making you happy, sharing this with God, it's just like with any other human being, with your spouse. You know, if you never talk to them about the travails of life, or if you never talked about them about the good things in life, and you only communicated to them in very formal missives, generally which are wish lists of what you want, you know, I mean, my goodness, that's not a relationship.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of Fiddler on the Roof is the Tevye moments with God.
Yeah.
Everything freeze frames, and Tevye and God go over here and have a conversation. Because that's probably the best depiction of my relationship with God. Mentally, I almost freeze frame everything that's going on while I have a conversation. And, you know, Tevye wasn't doing the thous and these and everything all formal. He was just talking to God like he did everybody else.
Yeah.
In reverence, but talking normal.
Yeah.
And that's a place that if we want to have a true personal relationship with God, I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah. And that's where I think a lot of people are stuck. You know, I have been personally several years ago now, I was asked, because what everybody says is that you have to have a personal relationship with God. Yes, true. I was asked a few years ago, what the heck does that mean? How do you have a personal relationship with God? And to be honest with you, I stumbled through an answer. I didn't give a particularly good one, and it didn't sit very well with me that I couldn't give a good one. And where I started on the path of to where I am now, where I'm like, wait a minute, this just talking with God is a really key important part, is with, not to get too rabbit traily here, but there's, you know, the 7 principles of making marriage work. The first one is what's called love maps. It's like understanding each other. And the second one is turning towards each other. And it's exactly this. It's talking with each other. It's the first thing you do to build a relationship.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I think that's a pretty important point. It's a rabbit trail from where we've come here on the vows, but I think it's an important rabbit trail.
Absolutely. Deer trail. Rabbits aren't kosher.
Besides, deers have more meat on them.
But back to
the vows, yeah.
Back to the vows and this portion. I envision this, and there were some challenges to this, so I'm being very specific. I envision this as we've seen in passages previous to this that the high priest has a responsibility to bear the consequences of anything done wrong when Israel brings their offerings. We see here that if the father nullifies a vow on the day he hears it, that
verse 15, I think, is what you're looking for.
Well, verse 8 is one, that the daughter will be released from that vow, and Adonai will forgive her. And then we see on down, you are correct, in verse 15, after it talks about the vows with the wife, verse 15, if he makes them null and void after he has heard them, then he will bear the consequent guilt. And this is both for the affirmative or the negative.
Yeah.
If you let the vow stand or you nullify the vow, then as a husband and father, then you bear the guilt of that if it was incorrect. Taking that responsibility off of the woman. But that doesn't mean that you lord over them in the day-to-day.
Yeah. This doesn't mean that the woman can't make any decisions,
Yeah.
because that's not what we're talking about here.
This isn't talking about authority over your wife or daughter. This is talking about responsibility, much like the responsibility that the high priest had towards Israel. And I should have bookmarked it so I could go to it. Proverbs 31 woman
Yeah.
talked about how she considered a field and bought it, and she conducted business separate from her husband. That should tell us a whole lot about how we view that husband and wife relationship. Do you have it there?
I do. So Proverbs 31:10, and you know what? I am just going to read this because the woman they're talking about here is a powerhouse.
Absolutely.
And this is raised as the ideal woman. So Proverbs 31:10, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good, and her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands to hold the distaff. She stretches out her hand to the poor, yea, she reaches forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow of her house, of the snow for her household, for all her household are covered with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry, her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, for he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. I mean, this woman is an absolute powerhouse, and you'd have to be a heck of a man to be worth a woman like that.
Yes. Does not paint the picture of
Timidity, timorousness, asking for permission all the time,
the timid
not
wife,
having any initiative.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, guys, our wives are supposed to have some initiative.
Yeah,
There's,
our wives are our helpmeet. If you're
Yes.
telling her to shut up and just do as you say, she is not helping you.
my wife offers some of the greatest advice that I have ever received. We are to become one with our wives so that we can become one with God.
Yeah,
If we won't let our wives have an opinion, then what's the purpose?
yeah,
We can't become one with God without our other half. That's the thing that makes us complete. Prior to Eve being made, Adam and God were the same. Eve was taken out of Adam, and they have to be reunited to be able to fully commune with God. I mean, I'm searching for words here.
Well, and dominion was given to them, not to Adam over Eve and the animals and all that. No, dominion over the earth and all the animals was given unto them, and they were made in the image of God.
The responsibility is shared. it needs to be a collaboration.
It does, yeah. And think about it from the leadership point of view. If you're a leader of an organization and you tell half the organization that their opinions don't matter, they need to shut up and stay quiet and just obey orders and that's it, you are hobbling yourself.
Absolutely.
Your whole organization, for whatever ends the organization is only going to be working maximum at 60%.
Mm-hmm.
But if instead you are a leader properly and are a good leader, then you are lifting people up. You're enabling people to reach their maximum potential towards whatever goal the particular organization has.
And we each have individual strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Now, typically, a man has better physical strength than a woman does.
Mm-hmm.
Not always.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean, I used the wrong word. I said better. Greater.
Greater, yeah.
Because just because that strength is greater doesn't mean it's better.
Mm-hmm.
Because some jobs require a more gentle touch.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that's probably why men don't bear children.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do good with an infant.
Yeah.
As good.
Right.
And
women have the nurturing, side, of the human relationship.
yeah, being different doesn't mean
Inferior.
lording over.
Yeah.
And we've really gotten away from this. And
We have.
It's been used tyrannically for so long that now the correction has a tendency to swing all the way to the other direction. Well, that doesn't make it right. And somehow we have to come back to what God had in mind. And I don't know how we do that.
With humility, for starters, and with a willingness to learn what it actually should be. And with kind of a clear-eyed understanding of, you have two people that are meant to be together, that are meant to complement each other, that together make a whole unity. And there are things that one is better at than the other, and vice versa. And when you have these working together, pulling in the same direction, then you have beautiful things that happen. Their lives are full, they're rich, they're satisfied and satisfying. Their children achieve great things. They don't fall away. They don't fall into drugs or whatnot. When they are crosswise, when the husband and wife is crosswise, for whatever reason. Now, whether that's because one is trying to dominate the other, or because they want to pull in completely different directions, it's still not that unity of pulling together towards that goal of building their lives, building up their children.
Well, and one of the things that I've seen among religious circles that it's really been a struggle is there are many women that don't seem to know that it's okay to have an opinion. And
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it becomes very, very difficult. And
we got to think too, we got to know what's happened in history and understand where the notion of the domineering father comes from. It comes from Rome. I have the concept of pater familias, which literally means the father of the family. So in Rome, the father ruled the family like a dictator. He had absolute authority with them. That includes over his children when they were adults. even
Yes.
after they've gotten married. So you would have to take your baby, your brand new baby that was just born, to your paterfamilias to see if he'll accept them or reject them into the family. And if he rejected them, you had to throw him in the river. It was horrible. And he stayed this way until he died. And then a new paterfamilia, and then would go to the next eldest son and that kind of thing. But it's a tyrannical domination over an extended family. And this is not what is shown in the Bible. But that thought, because it is Rome, Rome is very close, because of Rome became Christian and all that is very close to Christian. It has inserted, in my opinion, has inserted itself into various strains of Christian thinking. And so it pops up. And then we look at this because we have that thought in that paterfamilias thought that's been put in our mind from all the way back then. And we look at this law of the vows and we go, oh, well, clearly God says that, first the father has to dominate the woman and then the husband has to dominate the woman. And that's not what it says.
Well, and you couple in that, we see that Abraham was the patriarch of his entire clan. Well, if you have that preconceived idea that's been implanted through the generations, and then you read the scriptures and you see that Abraham was the patriarch of the entire clan, you have a tendency to associate the two.
Yeah.
And I dare say I know that that Roman idea was not what was going on in Abraham's clan.
No, definitely not.
I think his position was, once again, more of, in today's language, a position of responsibility rather than authority. Now, some authority came with that, but not on that tyrannical level.
Yeah. Well, the human family is an organization.
Yes.
And the human extended family is an organization. And it was more so back then because there isn't any overarching government like we had today. You're a cluster of tents, and there's another cluster of tents over there, and those guys might think that they can, come and take all your stuff if you're not careful, So the extended family was an organization as well.
And a patriarch that could wield a long sword was pretty handy.
Very much so, and very needed. But they, in any organization, you will have leadership. And in any leadership, you have two possibilities. One is tyranny, and the other one is good, enabling, healthy leadership that goes all towards the good.
And it works out in business, in a family, in a congregation.
Yep.
And a good leader tends to be a good trainer.
That's true. A good leader helps the people that he leads reach their fullest potential, to be, to go to the greatest heights, to be able to do the most that they can do within what they're able to and wish to do. And the leaders that are able to do that, their organizations, I'm thinking of businesses now, their organizations fly.
Yes.
And they do so much. Elon Musk is not building Tesla and SpaceX by telling people, shut up and listen to what I got to say, and that's it. He's bringing the best minds together.
It's really hard for me not to make a political statement here. But, yes, your best leaders lifts people up.
Yeah, they elevate.
Yeah.
They don't suppress. And guys, keep that in mind. And especially keep that in mind in your family. Is your family and all the members, are they growing? Are they being fulfilled in life? Are they living up to all their potential? Let's hope so. And if so, if not, there's something you can do about it. And before I go, remember, talk to God like we're talking to each other here, or like we do with our friends and with our families. Open up to Him, and He will open up to you. Have a good day. See you next week.
Baruch Hashem.